And I think we can also just think of our body as a compass. So instead of our body being something that's limiting us, holding us back, keeping us from doing what we really want to do, we could look at it as like our body actually has a lot more reliable information for us than our
Mhm.
mind does.
You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode number 273. Today, we're talking about how to heal your nervous system with Kimberly Ann Johnson. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast, now with over 1 million downloads. Here, it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you've calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of Mindful Parenting, and I'm the author of Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Hey, welcome back to the Mindful Mama podcast. I hope you're doing okay. Guess what? I have amazing news. I'm so excited to share it with you. I got my vaccine. Ah, I'm so excited. I can hear the angels singing as I tell you this. I'm so happy about it. We got to go on a nice vacation to visit some friends in Charleston, South Carolina. Did a COVID safe outdoor, mostly vacation. And then I came back and I got my vaccine. I'm so happy. Johnson & Johnson, one and done. I can't wait. If you are yet to get your vaccine, I can't wait for you to get it too. And we can all do things in person again. Hallelujah. So I hope wherever you are with that, you're doing well. I hope that even if you're going into a lockdown place, I hope you're hanging in there. I know that this episode is going to be helpful wherever you are. I had so much fun talking to my friend Kimberly Ann Johnson, and she's a somatic experiencing trauma resolution practitioner, sexological bodyworker, yoga teacher, trainer, birth doula, and a single mom. And she's the author of the new book. She wrote the book, The Fourth Trimester, an early mothering classic. It's so good. But her new book is called Call of the Wild: How We Heal Trauma, Awaken Our Power, and Use It for Good. So I'm so excited to talk to Kimberly. She's also the host of the Sex, Birth, and Trauma podcast. You know, the thing is, our bodies are telling us so much, but many times we're just not listening. So, in this conversation, we're going to talk about how tuning into our bodies is really this starting point for understanding our needs, improving communication, and finding our inner Jaguar. So, we're going to talk about predators and prey and your nervous system. There is so much good stuff here. I know that you are going to get so much out of it, and I really want you to listen for 3 very important takeaways. One is that our bodies have a register of everything that we've been through. Okay, so they keep a register of that. And also, two, how our social nervous system influences our behavior and actions. And this is such an important piece of understanding for us to have just about the way we work. It's so vital. And then the third takeaway I really want you to listen for is how removing the judgment from our view of predator and prey energies can heal us. This is really interesting stuff. Get to hear me talk about my artwork, all kinds of cool stuff in here. So I cannot wait for you to dive into this conversation. I could have talked to her for hours and hours, and I know that you are going to love it. And before we dive in, I want to let you know that if you're listening to this in real time, we decided to do a very special thing, kind of pre-Mother's Day 2021 here, and we're doing a mindfulness live 7-day mindfulness challenge for parents, and you can register. It's totally for free at mindfulmamamentor.com/challenge. And I also have a link on the resources page. So that's mindfulmamamentor.com/challenge. And it's going to be awesome. If you have wanted to start a mindfulness practice and you've maybe started and stopped and started and stopped and can't kind of get into the swing of things, this is for you. If you've never had one before, this is for you. If you have a solid mindfulness practice and just want to practice with thousands of other people, this is for you too. So it's at mindfulmamamentor.com/challenge, and I hope to see you there. Okay, I think that's all I got for you before we dive into this awesome episode. Join me at the table as I talk to Kimberly Ann Johnson. Kimberly, thank you for coming back on the Mindful Mama podcast. You're a returning guest. Woo!
Yay!
I'm so excited to talk to you about your book, and I'm enjoying it so much. Call of the Wild. And the subtitle is, I'm going to say it here because it's so pertinent: How We Heal Trauma, Awaken Our Own Power, and Use It for Good. And in it, I just want to like kind of just dive right in because there's so much like great content to talk about in this book, that in it, I think I was thinking about like, well, we have to kind of describe what the problem is a little bit, right? That we all have. And you say that like, despite years of therapy or meditation and yoga, many of us feel like trauma and shame and anger persisting. And you describe a metaphor for trauma that involves a river and a whirlpool that I thought was a very astute. I really like that. So I was wondering if you could talk to that a little bit.
Sure. Thanks for having me back. It's fun to have a long-term relationship. Uh,
Yes.
and for listeners who don't know, like we've met each other in person, and I love your artwork that came off of the last podcast. It was just after we even hung up the podcast. I was like, "What's that painting that you have behind you?" So, for anyone who doesn't know, you also have an alter ego as an incredible fine artist, and I am lucky enough to have one of your paintings in my house. Uh, so the river analogy is about capacity. Sometimes people think that healing trauma means we're going to feel good all the time, that we'll just have joy and we won't have the other facets of life. And a river has river banks. Sometimes when we feel compressed or stressed, or we're carrying a lot of tension or trauma in our systems, those riverbanks are narrow and the amount of water that can run through them is very little. It's like a trickling stream. And then when we have outer stimulus, a lot of our energy gets veered off into these whirlpools, which in somatic experiencing we call a vortex of trauma or a vortex of healing. So, the river's going along and then something happens, and then there we are, and all of our energy is siphoned off, and we're taken off of the course of where the river wants to go, which is, a healthy river. There's going to be obstacles, there's going to be rocks and beaver dams and uh, animals, and then, the water flows around it. So the process of healing trauma is shoring up those riverbanks so that it's not so easy for us to spin off into the vortex of trauma. And the vortex of trauma could look like a syndrome, like anxiety or depression or an autoimmune condition or a behavioral reaction, that all of a sudden we don't find ourselves just defaulting into that vortex. And then our riverbanks actually get wider and the flow of the water gets stronger, because what we can quote unquote handle, or what's in the realm of our capacity to be with without short circuiting into those responses, just gets much wider.
Mm.
So, the one other interesting part of that is that most of the time in the spiritual world, in the self help and development world, we think that we have to learn how to be with difficulty. The biohacking world is all about, like, you got to learn how to be with the tough stuff. But actually, what we know from healing trauma is we also have to learn how to deal with what's good and feel pleasure and be able
Mm.
to hold on to the things that feel good. We actually can't help someone heal trauma unless they have a capacity to stick with something that feels good in their system. Otherwise, we just go with them into their trauma vortex.
It's really interesting that whole piece about we need this capacity to feel good because when I'm as I've noticed over the years as I pay attention to my body, I notice that like something that feels really good can feel as weird and unsettling as something that feels really bad. And it's interesting because it's like, because you describe the nervous system and arousal. And I think of that the way like something feels so good, it can when I zoom into my body and I get into that, and we'll talk about that whole idea of that felt sense. It's like it's just as it is like a feeling of like arousal, like, oh, there's this. And I know that a lot of us try to kind of get back to back to normal, right, when something, or what's familiar, when something feels really good too.
Definitely. And that can be feeling good sexually. That could be making amount of money that you've never made or getting an offer. Even just right now, I have this amazing project that I got selected for, and I'm procrastinating about it. And I'm procrastinating because I want to get it right. And there's some perfection in there. And then there's also the fear of not getting it right and the exposure. So, novelty can register as activating. It's not just learning how to roll with or tolerate discomfort. It's like, well, how can we be with each other in victories? Like, how
Mm,
can we celebrate with each other? It's so complicated right now because the world is ever more framed in threatening ways, whether it's the planet or how we are together racially or how we are together with sex and gender. And so sometimes we can feel like, well, we don't deserve to feel good, or
mm,
I'm in a white body, I have privilege, I'm cisgendered, and so therefore I shouldn't feel bad, but I also shouldn't feel that good. And actually, maybe
mhm.
I should feel bad because maybe if I demonstrate that I feel bad, that's going to demonstrate some kind of solidarity, or I'm going to distribute the amount of suffering there is. My hope is that there is a way that we can both focus on being well enough to be available in these conversations, but also continue to, from a body perspective and a felt sense animal perspective, we can sense what other animals, including human animals, are experiencing, and that will come into a greater level of wholeness as well. So we really do need, I call it in the book, a hold it moment, which is, and those people in your life that can hold it with you. I have a friend who's in her 70s, and she was able to buy an apartment for the first time, and she was a stay-at-home mom and raised three children, and her husband was the breadwinner. And so it's like a really big deal for her that she bought an apartment on her own. But when she wrote me, she said, I knew you could celebrate this with me. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like I can't really tell my peers,
Mm.
because it's that other concept in the book of fitting in, of like, oh, it could be dangerous if I stand out. And so my system is telling me, no, go back, be the same, don't be too different, or else there's going to be a consequence to it. So we definitely need those people in our lives that can just see us for who we are and celebrate the good things with us.
And it all circles back to this idea of capacity you were talking about, the river. Like we want to widen those borders of the river. Sometimes I think of capacity in the terms of like comfort zone, like, that kind of growth is like outside of our comfort zone. And we want to expand that comfort zone, that kind
Yeah,
of
and some people
capacity.
call it, like, in somatic experiencing, a lot of people call it a window of tolerance. People
Mm-hmm.
might have seen that in polyvagal theory, but I don't like the word tolerance, because
Mm.
tolerate is something that's kind of passive, and most women go through life tolerating a whole bunch of things that shouldn't really be tolerable. So I like to think a bit of a window of presence. How much can you stay present
Mm.
to without getting kicked out into one of those eddies? And it's perceptible in each other. So, another way I talk about it is a platform of okayness. So, the big waves come in life. Everyone listening has had them this year. There's not anyone who hasn't had a big, their boat's been seriously rocked, or the canoe that you're on in the river is like, whoa. Uh, but to what extent does that stress become trauma is how we're able to metabolize it and digest it. And
Mhm.
the amount of platform of okayness, or our margin of capacity, or our window of presence to be available to life in spite of or in addition to all of the big waves.
Yeah, that I love that phrase, the window of presence. And I think that also really applies to like when I think about like what we do in mindful parenting, right? Like that's what we're trying to do is like be able to be present for the stuff that's coming up for us and then also our kids because they're regulating their especially those little ones are regulating their nervous systems sort of through us, right? So you describe this like body first and the word somatic, I want you to like kind of just define that because you use that a couple times, but like body first, nervous system focused approach to this healing work. So can you describe what is the difference? Like what's kind of like the normal way we're doing things and what is this body centered nervous system approach?
Sure. I don't want to make huge generalizations because
Mhm.
I know that a lot of your listeners have all different kinds of somatic practices, meditation practices, body based practices. But in general,
Mhm.
most of the way that our culture, meaning white over culture, is organized is a neurocentric framework. So things are top down. So you make affirmations, you make your gratitude list, you decide your self care practice, and you're doing all of those things with your rational mind, and you're telling yourself this is what's good for you. I should like this. If I don't like this, I better learn to like this. uh, the other way of doing things is a bottom up approach. So it's listening to what's happening and what your body is telling you, and assuming that your body actually has good information for you. So our culture really rewards us for overriding our body because it's
Mhm.
inconvenient, even to go to the bathroom. Like we just saw that whole weird Amazon thing that came out that drivers are having to go to the bathroom in their truck because they don't have enough time to stop and go to the bathroom. But even as somebody who works at home in her house, sometimes I realize I've been holding it for like 2 hours and I'm like, just go to the freaking bathroom. Let go of the bone. Like, what are you doing? Uh, so it can be as simple as that, like the very simplest of things. Do we know when we're hungry and we eat? Do we know when we need to either go for a walk or lie down?
Mhm.
Do we know when we need to be with other people or be alone? Not
Mhm.
based on what we think we should want, but based on what our system is really telling us that we need. So, probably most people listening have heard of the book Body Keeps the Score. Um, I think that's a little, I like that phrase. It says a lot. And I think we can also just think of our body as a compass. So instead of our body being something that's limiting us, holding us back, keeping us from doing what we really want to do, we could look at it as like our body actually has a lot more reliable information for us than our
Mhm.
mind does. And that comes with memory. So we tend to think because we're so brain neofrontal cortex oriented that memory is explicit memory. It's the thing that our brain remembers, the narrative our mind has told us, whereas our body actually does have a register of everything that we've been through independent of our mind. And those memories are implicit. So those memories we might not have a cognitive narrative for, but they live inside of us. And those are the things that are actually communicating much more with other people. That's why communication, especially when power is involved, gets so confusing. Why people have repeat experiences like, oh, I keep getting into the same relationship. My kid keeps putting their hand up my shirt, and when I say no, doesn't listen to me. Um, I keep getting in this dynamic with sex, whatever it is. It's because our system is always giving us opportunities to choose something that's more efficient, to choose something where our riverbank will be wider because that actually potentiates our system. But we look at it like we're getting punished, like, oh my God, here we go again. Like, same old conversation, same old this, because our nervous system is communicating that. And it's not the law of attraction, it's actually electrochemical signals traveling through our fascia that's communicating to another system because ultimately we're animals. So we're communicating all the time about, are we safe? Are we not safe? And what safe looks like is different depending on the relationship dynamic.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. So, I have two cats. I have Boots and Amber. They are a brother and sister pair, and I love them dearly. Amber is the softest, sweetest thing, and she just wants to snuggle. They both have these big green eyes, and Boots walks out to the end of our driveway and is the greeter for everyone on our street. But as much as I love my cats, I am not a fond of the stink bombs they leave in their litter box. Everything from cleaning to covering up the smell is a constant battle, and that is why I'm so happy that Pretty Litter is a podcast sponsor. Pretty Litter is kitty litter reinvented. Unlike traditional litter, Pretty Litter's super light crystals trap odor and release moisture, resulting in dry, low maintenance litter that doesn't smell. And Pretty Litter is virtually dust free because it's manufactured with special dedusting process, less dust, and no fuss. Pretty Litter arrives safely at my door in a small, lightweight bag, not the super heavy thing, that lasts up to a month. Now that I get my litter bags auto shipped, I don't have to deal with last minute trips to the store, and shipping is totally free. But above all else, here's why Pretty Litter is a pet parent's hero. It's a health indicator. So, Pretty Litter actually monitors my cat's health by changing colors when it detects potentially underlying issues. You won't find that in any kind of conventional cat litter. So, get the world's smartest litter without leaving home by visiting prettylitter.com and using the promo code HUNTER for 20% off your first order. That's prettylitter.com, promo code HUNTER for 20% off. Prettylitter.com, promo code HUNTER. You can find that link in the notes wherever you're listening to this episode. So, the idea of kind of going into this body center, nervous system first approach is what I'm kind of hearing from you is that I love what you're saying that and how you say it in the book, how the body, that we have this innate intelligence, like it's this trust of the body, right? Not rather than, as you change it, like when the body keeps the score, right? And it's more about really coming into perception with the body and getting out of our story a little bit. And you talk about this idea of these electrochemical signals, and that reminds me of this whole piece about the polyvagal theory and the social nervous system. That's so interesting. So, can you tell us what that is?
Sure. So most of us in high school, we or middle school, whenever you learned about the autonomic nervous system, most people learned that it was either sympathetic is fight or flight and parasympathetic is rest and digest. But that's actually a mixed metaphor. That's comparing apples to oranges. So if we're going to go apples to apples, or if we're just going to like take away that and we're going to go passion fruit to passion fruit, there's a whole other branch of the system. So it's not just two systems, there's another branch. And then we need to compare the branches when there's safety and when we're under threat. So
Yeah,
a
that's right.
sympathetic fight or fight response under threat is a fight or flight response. A parasympathetic response under threat is a freeze or collapse response.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So when it comes to vagal, polyvagal means many branches of the vagus nerve. So that's what polyvagal theory means.
Mm-hmm.
The vagus nerve has two branches. It has one that's ventral. Ventral means the front of your body. And it happens to be, in this case, heart, your literal physical heart, up into your head and neck and face. And then dorsal is the back of your body, back of your head, back of your neck, your flanks, basically. So this other tier is your social nervous system. That's the ventrovagal system. It developed from maternal bonding. So
Mm.
it's the fine muscles around your eyes.
Mm.
It's usually the most functional at 18 inches, which is breastfeeding distance.
Hmm.
And it's what's conveying, it's a survival mechanism so that we know how our young is feeling and they will survive, because as humans, we have this like incredibly long period where our young are dependent on us compared to most other mammals. So in order that they survive, there has to be a level of attunement. They have to know from our facial expressions, from our vocal tone, uh, from the content of what we're saying, we have a coherence, and therefore we're conveying to them safety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In the social nervous system, this is a little controversial, and this is the part that's the newest in both evolutionarily, but also in scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of debate and inquiry about, well, okay, so if that's where belonging happens, social connection. And people usually like to say, well, animals like birds have really complex social networks. Totally. But it's different because it's not operating from the same
Well, but it's
central
interesting, like,
system.
as you described that with, like, the eyes and that close connection, I'm recently like, for the last year and a half, I've been a dog owner, and, like, that whole thing with the eyes with the dog and that connection, I'm like, "Stop at the dinner table because you're killing me." But
That's because
that
you have
sounds
one of
like
the doodles that are basically humans. Those dogs are like humans. I dog sat one of them once and it spooned me. And I was like,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
is
my
going
dog spoons
on?
me. Yeah, totally. Yes, yes. She's a
Uh,
pretty
y-
pity, but yeah, I mean that they're like highly social, you know, herd or pack animals or whatever, the same way humans are. I mean, I don't know. Am I reaching here?
I don't know. I don't know that much about
Yeah.
animal behavior. Although so the other response under threat in the social nervous system, when we're not feeling connected, mirrored, well attuned, we don't feel we belong. We feel like we have to alter ourselves for belonging,
Hmm.
which is really the level that our culture is relating at this moment, where there's all this kinds of ways that we're sending messages to each other about what we have to do to say the right thing or do the right thing in order to belong somewhere. And we're also differentiating more. We're needing safety and homogeneity so that hopefully at some point we'll create some different power structures so people feel more comfortable relating in mixed environments. Who knows when that'll happen? Um, so at the social level, the response that maybe some people listening have heard of before is called, one of them is called fawning.
Mm.
And fawning is really came into popular discourse, I think, mostly during the Me Too movement, or the resurgence of it, this most recent one in 2017, uh, because fawning is when you go closer to a threat. And the social nervous system dynamics are really impacted by power. So if you're in a position of less structural power, it behooves you to behave in certain ways that are dictated by the person who has more structural power. And if you can approximate it, it's less threat than if it's farther away from you. So all of these situations that we saw of women going up to hotel rooms that from the outside seem like, well, why would you do that? Why would you, when you're in it, your physiology is telling you that it's safer for you to do that than it is for you to have the consequences of it farther away, or why someone returns to domestic abuse, or why someone is assaulted by someone and could continue a relationship with them. It's a system that's also profoundly impacted by hormones, because it evolved for maternal bonding. Maternal bonding is based on estrogen and oxytocin. So female hormones like estrogen and oxytocin predispose us towards how we relate with each other. So, in some people call it a superpower. It's a superpower because we're highly attuned and we're wired for that attunement. The flip side of that is that we're also disproportionately impacted by the flip side of that, which is really being so concerned and attuned about what everyone thinks about us and how everyone perceives that we are. And so we choose either this fawning, which is being really super nice, appeasing, um, tolerating, or the flip side, fitting in, which is camouflaging, not standing out, not saying what you think or who you are. And if you look at it in a racial spectrum, then fawning is more like code switching. Like, I'm
Mm.
going to do the thing or behave in a submissive way so that I'm not punished
Mhm.
by this power dynamic. Or I'm going to assimilate and I'm going to erase my difference so that I don't stand out, so that I'm less likely to be harmed.
Wow.
So we have
Yeah.
a lot of physiological, but people think that this is a rational thing. And it can be. I mean, you can choose to code switch, but it becomes ingrained and it becomes personality, and then it's passed generationally because it's survival. And the same goes for female male. Like, we're coded for being able to locate danger. And how we locate it is usually through these facial expressions and coded we could call it body language, but it's a little bit deeper than body language.
Huh. I thought that was so interesting. This social nervous system. I mean, the way you describe it, for to me, I just think high school. Oh my gosh, like that's high school all right there. Like fawning and fawning and fitting in.
Fitting
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, we're
Yeah.
trained in a lot of different ways. Like socialization is one thing, but we're also there's all we were talking about feeling good earlier in this conversation. Most of our families have some kind of a cap on feeling good. You can feel good, but don't feel too good, because that might make someone else feel bad, right?
Mm,
Don't and that could be, or don't earn more money than everyone else,
mm.
or don't earn less money than everyone else. Like there's a norm, and stepping outside the norm, uh, there can be consequences, either actual ones or inside of you. What you were describing earlier is that the perception is that you're going to lose connection, and losing connection is actually life threatening. So this is where it's people try to make that into an emotional thing, like, oh yeah, but that's an emotional need, that's not actually a survival need. But it actually is a survival need. Connection is a survival need.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. I am so incredibly thrilled that we are supported by Thrive Cosmetics because I have been a customer of theirs long before they were a sponsor of the podcast, because the products are amazing and they're vegan, 100% cruelty free, and they don't have nasty chemicals. It's all the stuff I want, works amazing, and it's good for you and good for the environment. So, the products are made with clean, high performance, skin loving ingredients. They're clinically proven formulas. Not only they highlight your best features, they actually improve your skin over time. They're products without parabens, sulfates, or phthalates. Thrive Cosmetics are never ever tested on animals. They're Leaping Bunny and PETA certified as 100% vegan and cruelty free. But let me jump right to the products because they are so good. I am in love with the Liquid Lash Extensions mascara. Now, I have kind of wimpy, sad, pathetic lashes, and I thought all mascaras were alike until I have used the Liquid Lash Extensions mascara, which I love. It just makes my lashes look amazing. It's super easy to put on, isn't all like gross like the other ones were. And then I use it with their Brilliant Eye Brightener, and I have two of these. I have one that's like a rose gold that I put in like the corner of my eye, and then another like kind of mauve one that makes my eyes look amazing. It's so simple, so easy to use. I'm not like a huge makeup person. The two of these together make my eyes look so, so nice, effortlessly just pretty and natural. The products are so nice, high performance, skin loving, all that stuff. But also, Thrive Cosmetics has a mission that is truly bigger than beauty. It's so cool. Every product purchased, Thrive Cosmetics donates to help women thrive, i.e., women emerging from homelessness, surviving domestic abuse, fighting cancer, and more. So it helps other people too. This is like a win 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 situation. It's like you look amazing, you support the podcast, you support women who are needing help to thrive, and it's all good for the environment and good for you. The whole bigger than beauty mission really inspires me. It really is a beauty brand that goes beyond being skin deep. I love everything about Thrive Cosmetics. Their products are the best I've ever used, and the bigger than beauty mission is so inspiring. You're going to love them as much as I do. Visit thrivecosmetics.com/hunter for 15% off your first order. This is an exclusive offer that you can only get here. That's Thrive, CAUSE, medics thrivecosmetics.com/hunter. Thrivecosmetics.com/hunter for 15% off your first order. And you can find that link right in the notes. So wherever you're listening to this, you can click on the player, you can see a place for the show notes, and you can find that link right there. You won't regret it. Yeah, and I think that it's hard for us to accept as Western human beings that emotional that connection is a survival need. We're, I don't know, rugged individualists, right? And gosh, we're not going to be interdependent. That sounds really scary to everybody,
Yeah,
I'm
we
sure.
don't have any, like, it's like in interdependence, people automatically are like, that's either weak or it's codependent. So we don't really have a good model for that. But
Hmm.
we're at a juncture where I think we're starting to get it because there's so many people are suffering from loneliness and isolation. And then, of course, the pandemic has just brought, like, tore off the lid of Pandora's box for that. So, really coming back into this understanding that the social nervous system, we're all impacted by it. And what we really need there is connection. We need to listen to each other. We need to validate stories. So in spiritual practice, a lot of times it's like we say, like, get out of your story. And this book is really about making meaning that's outside of your rational mind. So you're letting your body and your psyche inform you of meaning. And at the same time, we have capacity to sit with people who don't think the same things that we think, maybe. And we don't have to do what's happening, which is everyone chooses a side, labels themselves, and then demonstrates that side that they're on, and just gets in a reinforcement loop because no one's actually talking to one another about that, maybe have different opinions. And we're letting that narrative get shaped for us both through social media and the news. And our nervous system, while it is wired for connection, it's also wired to perceive danger. So, part of when we were talking about pleasure is developing what's right attention.
Hmm.
So, our nervous system is going to go to what's wrong in an effort to protect us.
Hmm.
And then the culture's feeding that back to us. So, it's everywhere we look if we want to find it,
Oh yeah.
ways that things aren't right and aren't
Yes.
working and are terrible. And it doesn't mean Pollyanna. It doesn't mean being a gradualist necessarily and telling people, look how far we've come. It's really more of a personal thing where you recognize what's around you and you're able to actually take in information that's happening in real time and know that what is right is going to give you the sustenance and the stamina to be able to make your own decisions, act from your center, become a trustworthy ally, become a reliable parent, repair when there's ruptures, right? I'm sure you've done a million episodes on that. It's like,
Yeah.
we're not going
Yeah.
to do it perfectly, but there's always repair possible. But to repair with ourselves and repair in our immediate community and then repair beyond our community, we have to have a trustworthy center. And the way to develop that is also to develop a relationship with what is working.
Yes. Yes. Amen. Mm. I
Mhm.
love it. I completely agree with everything you said, and you said it really, really beautifully. Um, Now, I want to talk about predators and prey, but before we
Yeah.
do, I want to kind of wrap up this. I mean, not wrap up because it's interwoven throughout the whole book, but the idea of the body first, nervous system focus, and you talk about as in a lot of sort of you have practices and systems of healing and developing that capacity for feeling good and for feeling anything really in our body, right? For feeling a lot of things. And you describe the felt sense. And for me, I could really relate to that because this is something that I have been I've been connected to my whole life. That's maybe my something that has been strong for me, but it's really something that is not so tell us what is that felt sense and why this sense of presence with our body is part of the healing work that you describe.
I learned the word felt sense before, or the phrase before I knew where it came from. And I was really surprised when I researched to find out where it came from, that it came from a psychological model. And it came from some research that was saying, why does some therapy work and other therapy doesn't work? And I'm like, $1 million question.
Yeah.
Love to know the answer to that. And what they found was that the people who were actually quote unquote getting better, which I think means feeling better, feeling more content in their lives, feeling there was some kind of resolution with who they are and what they're meant to do in the world, was that as they spoke, they were speaking from a felt sense experience. And the way that the interviewer knew that that was happening was that they were speaking slowly and they were describing things that they hadn't described before. So you could tell by the way that they were speaking that it was alive to them in that moment. So
Mm.
if they said, I'm sad, and the interviewer said, well, tell me more about that, they would say, well, it's kind of like I've got a weight on my shoulders. And if there was like water that was sitting between one arm to the other, it feels like it's, mid-level turbulence. And they could just describe from a quote unquote felt sense, which means in that moment what they're feeling, not a record of what they were feeling. So you probably do this when you help people with
Mm-hmm.
meditation, because people oftentimes, if they come to me or they come to you for a session, they're usually there to solve a problem. They're there because they don't feel good and they want to feel better. Okay, totally normal. We've all done it. That's why we seek help most of the time. You don't feel good and then go, yeah, I'm going to give myself more support. That would be awesome. And I am learning how to do that, but it's not usually what happens. So then people will say, well, they'll tell you, well, I feel this and I feel that. And the question is, are you feeling that right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then sometimes the answer is yes. Most of the time the answer is no. And then it's like, okay, well, what are you feeling right now? And not it could be a feeling, emotion, or it could be a sensation.
Mm-hmm.
What is the sensation? And sensation language tends to be in the present moment. And it's not really controvertible, because you could tell somebody you're angry. And then, we have this language from the 80s that's like, let me feel my feelings. And like, no one can invalidate my feelings. But the thing is that you could say you're angry and not appear angry whatsoever. I think lots
Mm-hmm.
of people have this experience. I mean, I had a whole relationship where I kept telling the person that I was angry, but because I wasn't embodying anger, they didn't listen to me,
Mm-hmm.
because it was like I didn't seem angry and I wasn't culturally coded as angry in a way they could recognize. So I wasn't getting the response. And we have this white puritanical culture that says like it's best to like not be emotional and
Mm-hmm.
describe how you feel, and then don't be volatile, or like with your kids, don't lose your temper and don't do this. But it's also some of the time good to
But
just really be what you are
and it's
and
not as
show what you
effective.
are.
It's really interesting that because that's not as effective. And some of the things I have to coach people in mindful parenting is like when they're describing how they feel, I'm like, show me with your face what you're feeling. Like when you say this in a super calm way, like that seems fake because you're not showing it to me, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it doesn't seem, there's no eros behind it, right? There's no
Mhm.
power that's coming behind it. And as long as we're talking about parenting a little bit, we tend to think that like we feel like we've got to protect our children from those big feelings.
Mhm.
But
A lot.
really, we help them develop their platform of okayness by being able to respond to all different kinds of feelings and situations, and know that they're okay and that the relationship is still intact. uh, you know my parents started reading this book, which is really exciting because they didn't really read the first book. And what my dad and I were having a heated conversation about racism, and I was trying to explain to him that what racism meant in his generation isn't what it means to this generation and what's happening. And I was trying to give him some context. So like, if someone calls you a white supremacist, it doesn't mean they're calling you a KKK member. It means they're telling you you're embroiled in a culture that has these values, type thing. So he was saying, well, I reject that, and here's why. And we were having an active, lively discussion. But I was super excited because in high school, all I did was like cry all the time while I talked to my parents. So I was like, okay, well, now I can actually do this. And my parents are different from me, and we can have, but I want to still have a conversation. I love them and I want to be in a relationship with them about things that matter to me. And my dad goes, okay, well, this was a lively conversation, but I learned from your book that just because we're having conflict doesn't mean we can't stay in connection. And I
Oh,
was like,
oh,
yes,
yeah.
yes. Like, I was just like, oh, fuck yes. Like, thank you. We have been waiting for this, because that wasn't how it was when I was growing up. It was like it's not that my parents didn't let me disagree. They let me disagree, but either I didn't have the capacity for the conversation when went into my trauma vortex, which was pretty much like they don't care about the world. They only care about themselves, the meaning, all the meanings that I made out of it because of my point of view. So, um, you know, well, I forgot what where I started.
That's okay. I love that. Yeah, we were talking about the felt sense and kind of just
Oh,
coming into our body.
yeah, and I think it sounds like you're doing exactly what I help people do, which is
Hmm.
coordinate response. So to me, I like the word coherence. Some people like the word congruence, but for me, coherence is like a bell tone that's like crystal clear. And the way you hit a crystal clear bell tone is you coordinate your facial expressions, the tone of your words, actually like where your voice is on the register. It's called prosody. And then your facial expressions, your affect, and your body language. That's how someone listens to you. And you get the response you're hoping for. The reason I learned this, which I think we talked about on our last podcast, but just briefly, is because my daughter wasn't listening to me when she was about 5. I mean, that's not the only time she didn't listen to me, but it was one of the times.
That one
And
time she didn't
yeah,
listen.
exactly. It was a strong phase where I felt like I was really losing ground, and people were telling me, if you don't get a hold on of this, you're going to have a very authoritarian child. And that was freaking me out because I wasn't noticing it. So, um, yeah, basically what happened is we went with 5 adults somewhere and they all wanted pizza or something, and she wanted sushi, and she convinced everyone to go to sushi. And my friends were just like, dude, you got to like get a handle on this. So I went to a somatic therapist, which is where I got the name of Jaguar. My course is called Activate Your Inner Jaguar. My book has a jaguar on the cover because my therapist was from the Amazon, and he told me, "You're a jaguar. It's the female cubs it's the female that teaches the cubs to hunt. Look at you. You have golden skin. Look at your spots, your freckles." And it was at that moment that I realized, oh, I have a totally mixed up view of hierarchy, and I have this inherited thing from my culture that says that we're all equals and it's democratic, and so I'm giving her way too many choices than what she can actually handle, and I'm not taking my right authority in this situation because I have ambivalence about authority and power. So he told me, just go home and start watching jaguars with their cubs and watch what they do. I wish those videos aren't on YouTube anymore, but it was a lot of wrestling and a lot of, the mom laying on the cubs and then getting up and struggling with pushing and pulling and showing who's in charge. And what I realized is my daughter was really looking for that. I'm a single parent, so she wasn't getting that. And that's actually why I was feeling sorry for myself, because I was like, oh, I have to be the unconditional love and the disciplinarian. And I hated the discipline part. But I realized it was because of my own ambivalence about being in that predator role and being the alpha. I was, for all kinds of reasons, very uncomfortable with that role.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. I am thrilled that Gemist is a sponsor for the Mindful Mama podcast because it is a pain in the butt to find good hair products. I mean, I don't know, as I'm getting older, the hair is one of the things that can make you feel a little younger, a little bit more vibrant, all of those things. But, you can spend a bunch of money on shampoo and conditioner with big promises that don't really pay out. But Gemist is a new company that makes salon quality hair care products. And all you have to do, they make it so simple, is you take their quiz and they recommend the best formulas for you based on your hair type, density, your concerns, etc. What's really cool is that I also matched with a scalp bar, and I guess I have been neglecting my scalp my whole life because it really actually is quite a game changer. And they have this thing called Smart Subscribe, which is basically a way to save money and ensure that you never run out of shampoo and conditioner again. And the Gemist shampoo and conditioner smells so, so good. Did I also not mention that this is a women owned company? The founder is a mom and dog mom and Harvard graduate, Allison Haar. You can get a subscription. You can save this 20% off with every smart subscribe. You get free shipping and you can get free returns, easy returns within 30 days. And they have incredibly quality ingredients free of sulfates, parabens. They're dye free. They're never tested on animals. That it's manufactured in the US. All of these things. And honestly, like your hair is going to look amazing. They use an algorithm that makes recommendations based on your hair data. So it's not like you're just guessing about it again. And then finally, just that smell. Oh, I love the smell. Love the smell. So, right now, my listeners can give Gemist a try and get 20% off their shampoo and conditioner with this smart subscription. And smart subscribers already save 20% off on each order. So, this is an amazing deal. And with free 2-day shipping, you can have it in just like this weekend, basically. So, visit gemist.com to get your personalized recommendation and enter Hunter at the checkout for 20% off and free 2-day shipping. That's gemist.com, GEMMIST.com, and enter the code Hunter at checkout to get the best hair of your life. And you can find that link right in the show notes wherever you're listening to this. Just click over and find it right now for some good hair. Yeah, you talk about, and I think this is really interesting. Like you talk about how you were vegetarian and there were all kinds of things like you just, you did social justice work. And I thought that was really interesting too. Like this idea of like relating to and understanding people who may be victimized, right? As this idea of relating to the idea of prey versus predator. And in the book you describe how you watch a video of a animal stalking a bunny and a predator stalking a bunny, and you were like, oh, and you related to the prey, but you realize that all these other people related to the predator. And I thought that was so interesting considering like, you know, for me, like, as like this is something I've wrestled with a lot. This idea, I mean, I guess for me, like this idea of I get so frustrated at some point like early on with the idea that women should just like not have aggression, like with the idea like when I was semi-vegetarian and wanting meat, and the idea that there was all these the value judgments that are laid on this, and that and you describe how a lot of women especially like relate to this like prey dynamic, and that we have to kind of start to activate this inner predator. So just, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I feel like this is so important to touch on.
Yeah, so I just recognized in that moment when we were watching the video that there were people in my class that related to the predator, and that was an aha moment for me because I thought only bad people related to the predator. I thought everybody related to the prey and wanted the prey to escape and wanted like, and I was nervous like watching it. I was like, oh my god, here it comes, here it comes. No, 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 get away. And when I saw that 30% of the class raised their hands, including women, saying they related to the predator and were having they were grinding their teeth, they were feeling saliva in their mouth, all of these visceral reactions, just like I was having the visceral tremors for the rabbit. It really was like, oh, I've totally given a moral value to these things, that somehow being a predator is bad and being prey is good. And then I saw that everywhere, like, oh, so we think predators are usually men, and so men are bad because predators are bad. And we think that prey is usually women, and so prey is good, so women are good. And then here we are in this super binary thing of like, you're either this or you're that. And in truth, in our nervous system, we have to be able to occupy that full spectrum. And then
Yes.
I had another turning point moment where I had a client come in and she was dressed kind of incognito. I live in Southern California, and it's warm here all the time. So you don't see people really. I mean, people get dramatic with their fluffy jackets at 65 degrees or whatever, but in general, she came in a hat and sunglasses and totally like swaddled basically. And she said, yeah, I'm like this all the time. And then she started explaining after her third child she became very energetically sensitive. She was having trouble going outside without feeling like overexposed. She didn't want to be really near her husband, and she was really confused. She didn't really know why she was feeling all those things. So this is a good example of someone who knows her husband is safe and intellectually wants to be near him, but her body is not allowing that. And then she knows she wants to go outside and be around other people because connection's important, but her system's not allowing it. What's going on? So at that moment, I said, okay, let's be the wolf and the rabbit. And I said, you can be the wolf, because I thought someone who's already in rabbit mode, fully like covered and hiding, would never want to be the wolf and would never want to be the rabbit because she was the rabbit all the time. And then when I said, why don't you be the wolf? She went into a totally submissive pose and just froze. And she could talk. So she was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why I'm doing this. And I just was able to take her and be with her in that freeze state while her body slowly thawed out and slowly unwound that particular freeze. And the aha for me was, oh, it's not that we don't want this power. It's that our system actually doesn't know how to do it. So most of the people listening here, they would probably call themselves feminists. They would probably say, I know this is my body. I know I can have the kind of sex I want in my brain, but my body might be doing something different. And so I developed a process of helping someone go from that predator, the prey energy, to the predator energy, which I call activate your inner jaguar, which is being able to tolerate sympathetic arousal. So when I mapped out before the social, sympathetic, and parasympathetic, I talked about it under threat. But in safety, the social nervous system looks like I can be who I am, I can be different, I can be biodiverse, and I still belong. The sympathetic system is what wakes us up in the morning. It's what gives us energy. It's what gives us healthy power and drive. It's like uh the thrust. And then the parasympathetic is what slows us down. It's what allows us to rest and settle. It's what allows us to release fluids. Birth, you need a combination of all of them. The social nervous system in birth is what allows you the context that allows you to feel safe, that you know that you could express yourself and be listened to and belong. You don't have to perform your birth. You don't have to be a certain way for the people in your birth room. You can actually be the felt sense way. The sympathetic
And scare your
is,
husband to death.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. A willingness to disrupt certain agreements. That's so common, right? It's so
Mhm.
common that women say, oh, I wanted this birth, but my husband wanted this. So we went to the birthing center. Or I wanted to do this, but my partner wanted this. And so we did X. And then afterwards, they have to deal with not only what happened in the birth, but the fact that really underlying that was that they weren't claiming their own agency because they thought the partnership was more important than their visceral agency.
Hmm.
But in birth, the sympathetic phase is more of the pushing phase. That's where you have action. And it's what a lot of, midwives will actually sometimes scare people a little bit to get that adrenaline going. Like, that's why people have to get out of the bathtub sometimes. The warm water is just settling them too much and it's not letting the labor go to where it needs to go. Um, and on the flip side, sometimes you have to get into water because your sympathetic under threat is there and you need that parasympathetic downregulation. But the parasympathetic is more of the dilation phase. So in sex, arousal is more of it's a oscillation between sympathetic and parasympathetic, but ejaculation is more of the sympathetic. So most women have ambivalence about sympathetic energy because if we've been prey, we don't want to be predator because we would never want to harm someone in a way that we've been harmed. Because the emotional signposts of sympathetic energy, which are irritation, frustration, anger, and rage, are coded as bad for most women to have. And uh, there's all this emphasis on calming down and being more balanced and measured rather than, okay, but what happens when there's big energy? Because if, for instance, lots of people come to me and they want to be multi-orgasmic or something, well, you have to do that. Your river banks have to be very wide because there's a lot of unexpected things that can happen in that state.
Hmm. Yeah, and I, I love how what you're describing is Yeah, to use the words you use in your book, like pendulation back and forth. We need all of these energies. We need to
Definitely.
accept and embrace, find a way, to like accept and embrace all of these energies and say, like, these are all part of the human system. Like, I remember when I went on the 7-day silent retreat, and it was like 7 days. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't close my eyes for like all this time for like, I'm never going to sleep at night, like, and for me, my purpose was to understand my mind and to get into this meditative state. But my other purpose was in taking care of my body was regulating my energy. And I was like, okay, I know how to do this. Like, I know how to regulate my energy. I knew that too much, I needed to burn some energy, like, I needed some fast movement. I went for a run every day. I did some really vigorous yoga during that retreat when everybody else was walking really slowly. Went downstairs in the basement and did some really vigorous yoga because, I mean, I can't agree with you more, like, we need to be able to, like, it's about un understanding our energy, accepting it, being able to access all of our energy, expanding that capacity. It's so cool.
Totally. And also that we're all not the same. Our rhythms
Yeah.
are our inherent rhythms aren't the same. And most of the output that most of the information that we've received is coming from a male model.
Mm,
So all the biohacking information, intermittent fasting, uh, you know, how you should structure your day. That's how the typical thing of like wake up super early and do this and do that is that's based on a testosterone cycle. That's not based on
mm,
a female hormone cycle. So I love that you were able to move. When I did silent retreat, we weren't allowed. Like they told us you can't move. And that's its own kind of free state. So that's, when I talk with yoga people and meditators, I also am trying to help them develop this rhythmicity because yoga and meditation often slow down our valve system. And what you're talking about is like, yeah, but we need to accelerate the valve system so that we can slow it down. And
mhm,
sometimes we have to do that, little by stair step. I feel like you and what you've described to me before, and I think is really interesting, is it seems like in your upbringing, your parents are really in tune with wildness. Your parents are really in tune with artistry. And so maybe in some ways you didn't have so many ruptures. So you have access to a lot of this raw energy because it was like encouraged. And I think that's unusual. And I think it's also really cool that you came to mindfulness kind of already intact because I think that a lot of people come to spiritual practice with a lot of trauma.
mm,
And that's why the spiritual practice gets a little haywire because the underlying trauma hasn't been addressed, and that was my experience.
mm,
I knew that I had some really extreme traumas, um, but I didn't realize how much just my regular old upbringing in an alcoholic family, but nonviolent one, um, was also predisposing me to those reactions. And I feel like about spiritual practice kind of how I feel about menstruating at this point is like I'm coming to the end of my menstruating years and I really just am sad that I didn't know my that entire time what I've learned in the last 10 years. Uh, and the same thing about spiritual practice is like I was so devoted, so committed, hours and hours and hours a day of everything, of asana, of chanting, of meditation for 10 years. And all of that because I just felt so much unrest in my system that I was trying to metabolize it. And I didn't know that. I mean, I loved it also. I was a
mhm,
dancer. I loved yoga. I was 100%, I'm so lucky. I've always done what I'm completely passionate about. So I wasn't punishing myself by doing it. It's just that now that my head is above water most of the time, I just wonder, well, what would practice have been like if it wasn't a platform to get me out of trauma, but it was just kind of boosting me more from an adaptive place.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. So I guess the question we leave the listener with is, you know, where do you feel, and what do you feel in your body? Like, where are you in the, are you feeling, do you where do you need more of that parasympathetic calm? Where do you need more of that sympathetic energy? Where do you need to kind of explore some of those things in your life? What would you give the listener some final words to chew on here in our wide-ranging conversation?
I think the simplest uh, thing that I could say that doesn't require, really much of an investment other than just pausing for a moment is number one, look around you. So look
Mm.
up, look up from your devices, look up from your screens, look at the horizon or above, look behind you, look below you, and actually see what's around you. So you might even notice if you do that right now, wherever you are, uh, your breath might change. You might notice a difference in your skin quality. You might perceive something different outside of you or inside of you. But we can become, there's an ethos that we're all too externally oriented, and all the answers are in our inner world, and that isn't true. And we need to be in the outer world sometimes and in our inner world sometimes, and we need to be able to pendulate between those two. So when people have habits that are hard to break and they really want to break them, like, I don't know, biting your nails or smoking, a lot of the time it's because they're going to a certain place in the internal world. And once, so that practice of going to the outer world, like noticing something that's outside of you and letting your attention land there like a bird that lands on a branch, and then going inside you and noticing something that feels good. If you can, for most people, it's very hard to look inside and notice something that feels good. It's either you don't notice anything or you just notice pain, like, oh, my, most people are like, my lower back hurts or my neck hurts. But if you could go a layer underneath that of just something that feels spacious or warm, or, um, and if this is really hard, that's normal, because even within yoga practice, which I did for about 13 years before I learned this work, I was contacting levels of my body and a very sharp attunement for how to move things, move, including energy. It wasn't noticing what's happening in a resting state and developing this pendulation. If you watch animals, they do it normally. They're just, and well-regulated humans do it normally, but we make meaning to it. So like if someone's not giving you great eye contact all the time and they're looking around, you're like, why are you looking around? It's like normally we would look around a little bit and then we would come into focus, and then we would look around and then we would come into focus.
Yeah, that was really interesting, that part too. There's so much good stuff in here, Kimberly. I'm really enjoying it. You guys should go get it. Call of the Wild by Kimberly Ann Johnson. Thank you so much for coming back on and talking to me about this. I could probably talk to you for a lot longer, but
Yeah.
um
Thank you.
uh,
It's really fun. I mean, it's fun to talk to people like you who get it and get it in a lot of different ways, both as a parent and as in your artwork, and like the reckoning of what does it mean? What does it mean to be in a human body? And it's very contested right now, right? Like there's just so many ways that, like, what it means to be in a body, what it means to be in a female body, how we relate with power, how we relate to each other. And I'm really hoping that, with the book, I'm offering people a new language for themselves internally, but also so that we can be with each other in a way that, is respectful and trustworthy and create the world that we want to belong to.
yeah, be with yourself and your whole body mind system so that then you can be with others as well, for sure. Thank you so much, Kimberly. Where can people find out about what you're doing in the world?
You can go to KimberlyAnnJohnson.com. So some people might have known me as Magamama, but I'm now, my birth name, KimberlyAnnJohnson.com. No extra E's. And if you go to KimberlyAnnJohnson.com/chapter, you can get the first chapter for free, which has like most of the major frameworks and the things that I was mapping out with Polyvagal Theory. That happens in the first chapter, as well as connections with connective tissue. And it gives you the frame for the book.
Yeah, it's well worth it.
And
For
then,
sure.
on social media, I'm Kimberly Ann Johnson too. At the moment, there's some weird punctuation, but we're hoping to take care of that.
And we'll have all that in the show notes. Thanks again, Mama.
Thank you.
So nice to talk to you.
Me too.
I love Kimberly's holistic view of humans, right? This, our body-based view, it just makes so much sense. We, getting back into our bodies, trusting our bodies, feeling the sensations in our bodies. It's so healing and powerful. I encourage you to get her book. It's really, really cool. Before I let you go today, just want to remind you that we have, if you're listening in real time, we have a 7-day mindfulness challenge that we're doing live starting on April 27th, 2021. And you can join that at mindfulmamamentor.com/challenge. And if you are not, I'm sorry. This is a live thing. Sometimes we do that. So it's good to actually be on the mailing list so you get emails about some things like this if you don't want to miss them. And you can join at mindfulmamamentor.com. I'm hoping you have a beautiful week. I hope you're in some nice warm weather, enjoying the outside with your family, looking at the beautiful, sometimes like today I was walking along and I saw a violet just like bursting out of this crack in the sidewalk. And it's like, it's where I really see the abundance of the earth and the universe. I love seeing things pop through cracks in sidewalks. So I hope that you can enjoy some of that this week. And I thank you so, so much for spending time with me and sharing that precious resource with me, your time. I'm really honored that we could do that. So thank you so very much, my friend. And I will talk to you again next week. Namaste.
Definitely do it. It's really helpful. It will change your relationship with your kids for the better. It will help you communicate better. And I'd say communicate better as a person, as a wife, as a spouse. It's been really a positive influence in our lives. So definitely do it.
I'd say definitely do it. It's so worth it. The money really is inconsequential when you get so much benefit from being a better parent to your children and feeling like you're connecting more with them and not feeling like you're yelling all the time or you're like, why isn't things working? I would say definitely do it. It's so, so worth it. It'll change you.
No matter what age someone's child is, it's a great opportunity for personal growth and it's a great investment in someone's family. I'm very thankful I have this.
You can continue in your old habits that aren't working, or you can learn some new tools and gain some perspective to shift everything in your parenting.
Are you frustrated by parenting? Do you listen to the experts and try all the tips and strategies, but you're just not seeing the results that you want? Or are you lost as to where to start? Does it all seem so overwhelming with too much to learn? Are you yearning for a community of people who get it, who also don't want to threaten and punish to create cooperation? Hi, I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, and if you answered yes to any of these questions, I want you to seriously consider the Mindful Parenting membership. You will be joining hundreds of members who have discovered the path of mindful parenting and now have confidence and clarity in their parenting. This isn't just another parenting class. This is an opportunity to really discover your unique, lasting relationship, not only with your children, but with yourself. It will translate into lasting, connected relationships, not only with your children, but your partner too. Let me change your life. Go to mindfulparentingcourse.com to add your name to the waitlist, so you will be the first to be notified when I open the membership for enrollment. I look forward to seeing you on the inside. mindfulparentingcourse.com.